Get going today. For those of you I've not had the chance to meet, my name is Scott Tesh. I am the city's Budget and Performance Management Director. We do have on the agenda to do introductions, both of CBAC and staff, but I do have one very important introduction to do first. We have with us this morning Pat Pate, who is the city manager for Winston-Salem, has been here for over a year now. Sometimes I say the new manager, but realize that he has been here for quite a while now. And so I will introduce Pat and I'll let him kind of talk about CBAC and a little bit of the work plan, and then we will go through our agenda. So Pat.
Thank you, Scott, and good morning to everyone. I want to first let me say thank you for your being a part of the Citizen Budget Advisory Committee. It is important for us to get to have folks in the community that are involved in what we're doing, and I know budgeting is not necessarily seen as the sexiest service that we provide. So we're not out, they're not directly putting out fires or catching criminals or fixing potholes or making sure our water and sewer runs. But without budget behind the scenes doing that, it's none of those other things happen either, because we've got to, it takes the whole group together. As Scott said, I'm Pat Pate. I have been the manager here for just a little over a year now. But I will say I got my start out of grad school back in the 80s here in Winston-Salem in the budget office and the finance department as an intern coming out of Chapel Hill. So I come from a long line of budget experience, and that's my general background. And so I have a love for the budget folks that the staff there in the budget office probably groans half the time just because they did it that way back then. Forget it, Mr. Manager. There's new ways of doing things now. No, I appreciate the work they do, and I appreciate all of you being here as a part of this. I know there's some new members, maybe. I know some of you have been on doing this for quite some time. So you know that this committee has actually been a long-term tradition in the city of Winston-Salem. Started back in the late 1970s, 79, I believe. 78, 79, as a way for the community, for council and the manager's office to get feedback from the community on our budget process. And there's a variety of big issues that are going on. So I appreciate that long tenure of this group, being able to advise both me and city council on things of importance related to the budget process and what's going on. And over the last couple of years, I know last year I was here, probably a little, this process may have started a little earlier. I was brand new trying to get things done, but so I know that you've made some recommendations to council and had a presentation last year to talk about some of the things that y'all looked at and were providing input on, and which was very helpful, and we really appreciate that. So I know you've been working on things like some of our fire service and a variety of other things, city-county cooperation and other efforts that are really important. This year, there's probably a few new things we're going to ask you to focus on a little bit. One is our major revenue and expenditure forecasting. Scott and I have talked a lot about the need to have good long-term forecasting. One of the things we're lucky our council members all serve 4-year terms. So many places I've served, they've only had 2-year terms. So 4 years is a little longer perspective, but the reality is, from a sustainability standpoint, we have to really look long-term, 5, 10, 20 years even out into the future, making sure that decisions that are being made on both the budget and on the revenue and the expenditure side are going to be sustainable for the long term. So we want to put a little bit more emphasis on that and get some input from you into that area. Another area that we've talked about, Scott and I and Kelly in finance, is looking a little bit more at our how we're using debt. One of the things that I see coming in new is that a little bit of what I would consider an over-reliance on debt for things that are maintenance or ongoing equipment issues, like financing our fleet vehicles. When interest rates were roughly 0 or 1%, that might have made sense when you could borrow money at no cost. But currently, when interest rates are 6, 7, 8% or more for vehicles, I'm not so sure that that's the best way for us to continue to operate, as opposed to buying it in cash. or doing some kind of cash financing instead of borrowing those funds to do that. And our debt numbers are actually a little higher than we'd like them to be, our ratios. So that also potentially could hurt us on our debt rating in the future if we don't get a little bit better control over that. And then the one that you're probably going to hear a ton about, and that I think the community needs some education about, is we're in a revaluation year. So what that means is everybody has a different meaning on that, and a lot of times people don't take the time to understand that the revaluation process is really just to set an even playing field across the community, so that all properties are valued on an equal basis. Because over 4 years, some values have probably gone up tremendously, some may have dropped, some may have gone up slightly. This resets the playing field for everyone, so that everybody is paying on a tax basis the same amount, depending on what the tax rate is set at. So just because your home value goes up doesn't necessarily mean that your taxes are going to go up by the same amount. That'll depend on what rate is being set at. So a lot of that is education to folks as to why we do revaluation and understanding that process. But we know that that'll be a big topic for us in this upcoming year. And so having some information, or having you dive into it a little bit to understand the dynamics of that. It probably, like most places, our residential is going to go up much faster. It has been going up much faster than our commercial. So the other issue for us is it does tend to place more of a burden when you set a tax rate based on the property tax value on residential versus commercial. So people need to understand that. And there may be other ways we need to offset that in terms of looking at our revenue structure. So I know Scott and his staff will be giving you a lot of additional information and going more in depth into all of these issues. But I just wanted to take a couple of minutes really to say thank you for being here, for volunteering your time and your expertise into this process for us. And I do appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing the results of your ongoing dialogue and conversations and recommendations on these subjects. And with that, I guess Scott didn't say to tell me to do this, but if there's any questions at this point from me, I'm not going to stay on for your whole meeting. I'll be glad to answer anything.
Hi, Pat. I would like to just ask a general question that some people in the community asked of me.
Okay.
And that is, does the city have any opportunities for schools to apply for funding for things like underprivileged kids going on field trips, or like if they need, or they have a need, an unmet need for something, not like a building expenditure, but something that they're trying to do, a program, for example, is there an opportunity to apply for some sort of funding, like from the school principals or the school administration teams or what have you? Is that a thing?
Yeah, in general, that's a great question, and we get asked this a lot. Obviously, in North Carolina, the way the systems are set up, schools are funded primarily by the state,
Right.
with supplements by the county.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not in the education business per se as a city.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, you as a city resident are paying county taxes. And so your county taxes that we pay as city residents, about 75% of those
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of what's paid into the county is what's used to support the school system. So primarily, school funding should be coming from the county.
Right.
Now, having said that, we do have a nonprofit grant program, so that if there are things that fit into the to the city services that are being provided that relate to the school system, there is opportunities to do that, and we do partner with a variety of things. There have been efforts for early childhood education, for we've spent money on Cure Violence from the ARPA, which is actually to help school age folks learn alternate ways to deal with disputes that they might have, and as opposed to some of the ways that make the news when they deal with those kind of things. So those kind of things happen, but like the PTA or school principals just coming in and asking for money, that's probably not really
right.
what
Right.
purview.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome. I got off relatively easily then.
You say it's your one chance to stump the city manager while you got it. if nobody has anything else, I will say, Pat, thank you very much. Appreciate your time this morning, and you did a very good job of stealing the thunder of the things that we're about to talk about here later on the agenda. So.
That's always what happens when you put somebody first. They can say all the things that you would have said. That just means that Scott prepped me well. I hope y'all have a great meeting, and look forward to seeing the results of your work. Thank y'all very much.
Appreciate it, Pat.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Well, I will officially again say good morning to everyone. The next thing we have on the agenda are our introductions to do. And before we get into that, I will say for the new members, welcome officially to the Citizen Budget Advisory Council. It's a council that meets generally starting in the late fall up through the June timeframe, basically through the budget development process. And generally, and we'll talk about this later on the agenda in terms of our meeting schedule, generally meet about once a month. Staff provides some information, does some research, provides that to you. You get an opportunity to ask a lot of questions and dive in. And usually we go about a month later. That gives us an opportunity to take the questions that you've asked, work with additional staff, answer some of those questions, and prepare for the additional things that are on the agenda. So we'll talk about that generally, but for new members, it's usually about a once a month kind of thing in terms of investment and commitment. We will also be further down the agenda electing a chair and vice chair as we do each year. As Pat mentioned, the management team looks at the information that is provided by this council as well as the city council itself. At the end of this process, generally, there is a report that comes from CBAC that includes recommendations. And so last year, Fred, in his capacity in that role, actually presented to the city council at one of our budget meetings, things related to, you heard Pat talk about fire services. So there were quite a few things in terms of the equipment replacement schedules, warehousing of information, warehousing of equipment, facilities, staffing needs and overtime. There were quite a few things that CBAC looked at and made some recommendations about. And I believe 2 or 3 made their way into the budget. And I will tell you openly as a group, the ones that didn't make their way into the budget are still on the fire chief's radar, and for y'all having looked at it, he was very appreciative of some of the comments and recommendations that you made as well. So happy to have you here. Glad that we had a chance for the city manager to come and do the 30,000 foot level introduction. And I think it's very important. We will stop here and do introductions of everyone. We are missing a member or two. But we've got some members of the CBAC and members from staff as well. And so I'm just going to start on my screen at the top left and work around. So as I call your name, if you want to introduce yourself, kind of tell us what you do, where you're from, your background, and we'll continue with those introductions. So top left for me is Ross.
Okay, Ross Griffith. I retired from Lake Forest University 10 years ago. Worked there 47 years in the administration. A couple jobs for admissions, institutional research, and I've been on this committee for 3 years now.
Very good. Fred.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Fred Salisbury. I'm a physics professor at Wake Forest. I live in the West End. I think this is the start of my 4th year on this committee.
Very good. Tony.
Howdy, y'all. Tony Piacenza. I am in my 3rd year, I think, on the committee, and I am a sustainability consultant, ESG reporting lead for the company that owns Food Lion and some other grocers. So I do international sustainability reporting. That's really what I do for a living. Live in Winston-Salem, also in the West End, so not too far from Fred, I'm sure.
Oh, James Cena.
Hello, everyone. I am Jamesina Woodyard. You may call me Jamie, and I live in the almost southwest area of Winston-Salem. I work at UNC School of the Arts as a business officer, which is kind of a fun term for accountant. And I'm going to say I'm going into my 3rd year on the council. Been an excellent experience for me. My master's is public administration. And so this is, of course, right next to my heart. And I love community and community service and public service. So I'm just here to give and contribute as much as I can. Thank you all.
Paul.
My name's Paul Koslow. This is my first meeting. I've lived in Winston for about 4 years, across from Forsyth Country Club. And I work as an administrator for a company called Oak Street Health, based out of Chicago.
Very good. Emily?
Hi, this is also my first meeting. I live in the Buena Vista area. Right now, I am director of search for a small digital marketing agency, but in a prior world, I was worked in local government, including in a budget office in Albemarle County, Virginia, worked for the city and county of Durham, Catawba County, all in the manager's office, and also have a MPA, Jamie. So glad to be here.
I think that is everyone I have from the CBAC that is on my screen, making sure I'm not missing anybody. If I am, feel free to chime in and introduce yourself. Otherwise, we'll kind of move forward with a couple of the staff introductions for folks that you also see on the screen. So not seeing anybody else, I'll start again kind of on the top and go around. I'll start with Janice.
Hey everybody, I'm Janice Hillenbrand. I'm the person that you have received emails from so far and will continue to receive emails from, so you'll get real familiar with my name. It's really nice to meet you all. I'm a budget analyst with the city and I've been here for about 2.5 years, and I'm just excited to work with you guys for another year. So thank you so much.
We'll also note that Janice is our senior budget and evaluation analyst, and she has CBAC as one of the assignments that she helps coordinate. Going around here, make sure I don't miss anybody. Sarah is next.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Coffey. I also work here in the city's budget and performance management office. And I've been here about 8 years. So great to see you all. Thank you for being here.
John?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sean Liebenow, budget analyst, City of Winston-Salem. I've been here with the city almost 2 years now. So yeah, happy to be here. Thanks.
And Renee.
Good morning, I'm Renee Williams, and I am a budget analyst, and I've been here with the city, it'll be 5 years next month.
Very good. So those are some of the staff introductions as well. We potentially may have some other staff members from the budget office coming at different times based on some of the things that we have over the course of your work plan for the year. Did my introduction. I didn't say how long I had been here and that kind of thing. So my name is, even though it says Joseph, no matter how many times I change it on Zoom, my name is Scott. I go by my middle name, but I have been with the city. It'll be 14 years next month. I started as a budget analyst here back in 2011 and have worked in a couple of different capacities in a performance management office, and then ultimately kind of consolidating that into what we have here. So budget has a couple of different functions. We do kind of the core budget fiscal planning component of it. We do some enterprise-wide performance management and strategic planning kind of consulting through the manager's office for the organization. And then we also have our internal audit division is housed inside the budget office as well. So we will be focusing almost completely on that fiscal planning component of budget, but there are a few other things that we do as well. So generally speaking, I'm going to go through the agenda here for today, and then we'll pick a vice chair and chair, and then we'll let that person run the agenda in future meetings. Pat, I think, did a very good job of talking about the history of CBAC and kind of the charge of CBAC. CBAC is technically in the city code, so this is a committee or council that is created by the mayor and city council directly and has a charge in city code. And generally speaking, that charge is to review the city's budget process, make recommendations about that, and then also do other special assignments as requested. And so the folks that have been here for 3 or 4 or 5 years have seen those special assignments can be benchmarking. They can be looking at a very specific department, the efficiency, effectiveness, and outcome of it. All sorts of things that I've been doing CBAC for 10 plus years too. And so happy to take any recommendations for what you'd like to see in future years. But obviously, as Pat said, coming in as a new manager, he had a few things that he really wanted CBAC to focus on kind of in his first full year at the helm here with the council. And those being the 3 things that he talked about. So I'm going to call it understanding base budget requirements. which is a term you'll hear budget staff use. So one of the things that he really wanted CBAC to look at is what our expenditure forecasts look like, what our major revenue sources look like, and as you see kind of our multi-year forecasting, what the delta in those can look like. And so, Emily, you may have had some experiences in budget offices and know that there is generally a gap and it can grow over time. But we're going to let you dive into the weeds of what our organic revenue structure looks like in terms of growth, and also what that expenditure growth looks like, be it personnel, supplies and services, any of our capital equipment costs transfer to other funds and things like that. So Pat is very interested in having the view of folks who are closer to budget, provide some recommendations and see the details of what it looks like to have a budget gap. And really for a city that grows like ours to know that there is almost constantly a budget gap and how do you plan for that in future years. I will tell you for the last many years, particularly coming out of COVID and even having come out of the Great Recession, there's been a lot of emphasis on how do we balance the budget this year? What does the tax rate look like this year? And Pat wants the council to focus more on not what just does this year look like, but what are your strategic priorities for the next 4 to 5 years, and what does your revenue structure need to look like for you to be able to make progress on those. And so I think it would be very interesting and important for y'all to make some recommendations to the city council directly about what not just the tax rate may look like next year, but as it has changed over time. And we will show you, folks that have been in the city for a while and with CBAC for a while know that the tax rate is the rate itself is significantly higher than it used to be 15 to 20 years ago. What you pay in taxes is obviously not just the rate that's multiplied by value, but we'll definitely look at kind of how it's changed over time and then what it means to set a tax rate and leave it alone versus what it means to watch it kind of fluctuate over time as it has been doing here recently. So we'll talk about base budget requirements. When we say that, we mean what does it take to keep the lights on? What does it take to keep the potholes filled, the fire trucks and police cars running? And then we'll also show you some of what we refer to as enhancements. So in addition to whatever it takes to continue providing the same service that you did last year, what are those types of things that departments are looking at that are service level enhancements to make their services better for the community? And then layered on top of that will be a discussion of the strategic priorities of the city council. So we do have a new council. Pat kind of alluded to that. There are 3 new council members who were sworn in earlier this month. And so they will be having their first strategic planning session, be a retreat actually out at Tanglewood at the end of January. And so when we meet in February, I will have a much better idea of what it is that this new council, as a group of 8 people plus the mayor, I think are the top priorities for the city. And we're going to call it 2 to 4 years. It will be a 4-year plan, but we're going to try and focus on both short-term and kind of midterm priorities with them as well. So that'll be the first thing, is kind of just a deep dive into our budget process, calendar, forecasting, and what does the budget really look like. I'll tell you, we're going to focus a lot on our general fund. We've talked about that a lot in previous meetings. So general fund is where most of the government services that people see every day come from: police, fire, recreation, sanitation, all of those types of things. If you want to open up those discussions, I'll probably show you some things on water and sewer and stormwater, some of our enterprise funds, but we will spend the vast majority of our time talking about general fund and then also kind of our debt service fund. Those are really the tax supported, our property tax supported funds. We'll also spend a little bit of time talking about our transit system, which is property tax supported and is in need of additional resources from a base budget perspective to continue the level of service that they currently have. So that's kind of the first thing on the work plan. I'll stop at each one of these and say, does anybody have any questions or general thoughts before I hop down to the next one? Otherwise, I can kind of keep going through here. What else we're working on? Seeing none. The second thing on the agenda Pat talked about is the use of debt. There are 2 specific areas that he kind of alluded to and mentioned that budget and finance are currently working on. So the first is the use of debt for equipment acquisition. We have for a very long time used an internal, we call it the internal fake bank. It doesn't exist the same way that it did before, but I'll kind of provide you a history of how we have issued limited obligation bonds or done other debt issuances internally, used that to fund the equipment purchases and then charge to the departments over time. Pat alluded to, interest rates are not what they used to be, and actually the laws around how we structure that fake internal bank have changed over time, making it so that we don't get the same benefit out of this. I don't want to spoil what we've done in the future, and I'm happy to answer any questions about what used to be called our municipal leasing corporation. But we don't have the same structure that we used to, and so we are at current paying a 5.5% interest on vehicle acquisition. Pat is very interested in getting rid of those interest payments and going to cash financing, and so we will show you information on what our leasing fund looks like, kind of the outstanding amount of debt that's in it, the vehicles under that program that have been purchased and are to be purchased, and what it might look like in terms of trying to create the resources and pay down either immediately or over time the outstanding debt for that program to transition to a cash financing for vehicles and equipment. Just generally speaking, when I say equipment, I mean it's everything from a pickup truck all the way up to a fire truck that we lease over a term of 5 years. In certain cases, we do lease other things. There's IS server equipment, infrastructure upgrades, and all kinds of things, but we'll kind of get into the details of that. So that's one component that Pat is very interested in y'all diving into the details and having discussions about what that looks like. And then the second one is the use of our what we call 2/3 bond funding in the city. We may have spoken about this before. Generally speaking, there are several types of debt that the city can issue. The one that residents are most familiar with are general obligation bonds that you would see on a referendum. So if you go to a vote and it says, do you want to, $20 million for streets improvements or for a new fire station, recreation facilities, those types of things. There is a cutout in state law that actually allows us to issue general obligation debt without voter approval. And we call them 2/3 bond funding because it allows you to issue 2/3 of the net reduction of principal in the prior year without going back. And so what that really means is if you had, a certain number of payments or debt service payments, so there's your principal reduction, you issued whatever the net of that is, 2/3 of that you can reissue. For us, generally speaking, that number is roughly in the $10 million every other year range, and we have historically used that for capital maintenance. I'm going to open up the books to y'all and show you what that looks like. We'll have a very candid conversation. I think internally, what is capital maintenance, what you should use debt for. There are some places where we're probably not using it as appropriately or intelligently as we could. There may have been times we were coming out of the recession, the Great Recession, and through COVID, and thought we really need to get some things done, and we applied debt to something as a resource type, and then you look back and think, is that asset really going to last 20 years? The course of the debt issuance itself and the payment schedule. And so Pat has come in and really wants us to focus on what is more of a best practice, is using that capacity for large scale renovations and large scale capital maintenance and get away from some of what he considers to be operating maintenance. So we'll show you what that looks like in terms of how we've been using some of those resources, how we can use some of those resources in the future, and what effect that has on the ability to create current resources for what would be operating maintenance at that point. Talk to you about what that means for the tax rate as well. So that's kind of when he was talking about the use of debt, the two things that we'll hit on there, the equipment acquisition component of it, as well as the use of 2/3 bonds, general obligation bonds for capital maintenance purposes. Any questions there before I move on kind of to that third part? Emily, did you unmute? Okay, thought I saw it. It may have just been a shadow. And then the third component that Pat talked about was general property revaluation. So by state law, revaluation has to be done at least once every 8 years. It is handled by the county. Every county in North Carolina handles that process. They are responsible for valuing property throughout Forsyth County. We are on a 4-year schedule here in Forsyth County. Some counties do every 2 years, some every 3 years, some every 5 years. I think generally in that 4 to 6 range is where the vast majority of counties in North Carolina fall. And generally, revaluation isn't quite as big of a deal as it's probably going to be this year, or as it was, I think, maybe 8 years ago. The rationale for that being that the housing market has changed very significantly. over the course of the last 4 years. If you have purchased a home or have the realtor.com app on your phone and just look around, have friends who have purchased, you know that the value of homes has increased significantly. And so I use my own house as an example for this. The current tax value of my home is $221,000. So you take 221,000, divide it by 100 and multiply it by our tax rate, which is 72.5 cents. And that's what I pay in city taxes. The county tax office is doing this revaluation, and in January or February timeframe, everyone's going to get a notice that says, here is what your new valuation is based on market conditions. I know that there has not been a house that has sold in my community in the last 6 months for less than $330,000, which seems kind of crazy to me. If John Burgess, who is the county tax director, finds that that is the value of my home, what that means from a revaluation perspective, right, is that the value of my home from a tax perspective has basically increased by 50%. And I think you're going to see a lot of areas of the city that have 50+% valuation increases, particularly on the residential side. But we are going to have for you, and I believe it'll be in March, but we'll work out exactly which meeting it is John Burgess, who is the county tax director, is going to come over and give you a presentation and show you what that revaluation cycle looks like. He'll talk to you about the Machinery Act, which is the series of laws in North Carolina that govern how you value property and the administration of tax collections. But he's got a lot of really interesting data about how both residential and commercial or industrial property valuations are looking compared to the last reval. And it's got some very interesting heat maps, can show you in individual communities where this part of the city may have a generally speaking, a much different change in aggregate valuation than on the other side. For those of you that have been in Winston-Salem quite a while, again, I want to say it was it may have been 12 years ago, actually, in 2012, going into 2013, where we saw the exact opposite in many cities of what, or in many communities of what we're seeing this year, where valuations actually dropped a lot. And so the county tax director at that point was having a lot of conversations and talking to people about what it meant if your house was worth, from a tax value perspective, 120, and it went down to 80, 60, $90,000, what it meant to lose tax value. And there are a lot of people in the community talking about you're hindering the value, you're taking value away from me, you're taking equity out of my home. John will talk to you about how he approaches that, the language that they use around it, and how he will tell you it is the county's job as best as possible to simply mirror what the market is doing, that he's not changing the value of a home or a business or a piece of land, that he's simply trying to reflect what its current value is. So we'll have the opposite side of that in many places this year, where as a result of significant increases, you may have folks who are restructuring and paying effectively more in taxes than they were previously. But a very long and interesting conversation to come on why we do revaluation and what it's going to look like. John will talk across Forsyth County. We'll give you some numbers specifically for the city of Winston-Salem, but most of his presentation will focus countywide as well. Any questions on reval, generally, cycles, that kind of thing? Otherwise, we will let John really hit that when he comes across. Well, I have been talking for way too long. If anybody has any questions generally about the CBAC or anything else before we move down to election of chair and vice chair, happy to take those, or just have kind of an open-ended conversation about anything you want to. All right, well, we're skipping right along this agenda. But that leads us to election of the chair and vice chair. Generally speaking, we do take motions and have people vote on things. As this is a city committee and board, you will find that this process runs itself very informally in many cases, but happy to, at this point, have anyone unmute their microphone and make a recommendation for someone as chair of the CBAC for this year. So those duties will include essentially working through the agenda, hosting kind of the meeting from that perspective, and then also probably the major duty of the chair, as we recognized with Fred last year, is actually coming to the city council, and we're going to change the budget schedule up a little bit. So I'll say probably actually coming to the full council, not just the finance committee this year, and doing a 5 to 10 minute overview of report and recommendations from your work plan. So if there's anyone who's interested in being in charge and talking in front of the city council, or you'd like to recommend anyone else, feel free to unmute and give us your thoughts. New members are not excluded from this. Feel free, even though if it's your first year and you'd like to have that. Otherwise, someone may volunteer you into it, so just be careful. Any notions for anybody? Anybody want to do it? Fred doesn't want to do it again, obviously.
Well, I mean, I just think I've done it 2 years in a row. It's somebody else's turn.
Sure.
It's not
We are
that
missing-
much work.
We are missing a couple of members, and we can hold this till next month's meeting. If a couple of other members want to come, like I said, if y'all want to go ahead and identify these roles, that's fine. If you want to hold it until next month, that's fine as well. Generally speaking, I would say we probably only get 6 or 7 members in each meeting. It is very rare for us. There are always conflicts to get the full membership roster in a meeting. So happy to hold this one till next month if that's kind of the pleasure of the council.
Yeah, I mean, I am willing, however, not like excited. So like, yeah, I've been vice chair. And usually that comes with very little responsibility. So if anybody is kind of looking to test the waters a little bit, I recommend kind of stepping into that role. Is a nice way to, walk into the shallow end, so to speak.
Yeah, I recommend Tony be promoted.
I second that.
So, Tony, are you accepting of the nomination for chair?
Yeah, I'll.
Okay. So we'll say we have the motion and the second. Feel free to unmute and say aye, or just kind of raise one of your hands. We'll do that kind of informally and let Tony. 1, 2, 3. There's a majority of the group. Well, Tony, you have been placed with said burden. We appreciate stepping up to the plate. Yeah, you know what's in store for you. You've been here for a few years. As Tony said, the other role is really the vice chair. That role steps in the absence of the chair to run a meeting, or if heaven forbid the chair were unable to make that report to council, we'd ask the vice chair to do it. But it does have significantly kind of less overall responsibility. If there's anybody interested in kind of doing that, more than happy to take a volunteer for that one as well. I think Jamesina left us, but it seems like she is back now. And again, we can hold this until next meeting as well. There are at least 2 other members, 2 or 3 that we don't have. So happy to hold that one if we need to. And just put Tony on the spot to do it all next month.
Well, I would nominate Jamie to do it if she's interested.
I don't think what am I being nominated for? Because wait a minute, my computer quit on me and I had to restart it. And I just rejoined and heard I would nominate Jamie. So I have no idea what I just got nominated to do.
Vice chair.
Yeah, you got nominated for the vice chair position, which obviously Tony was nominated for chair and has accepted the role, has been voted on. So in Tony's absence, you would help us with the agenda and run the meetings, and heaven forbid Tony not be able to make the council meeting to present the report and findings. We would want you to do that. So it's just taking on the responsibilities of the chair when the chair is not available.
I mean, yeah, I would I accept the nomination, and I'm a little bit apprehensive because I feel like that sounds like a tall order, but we've got some great people on the council. I know you all will be more than happy to support and help. So like I think we'll be fine. We work well together, all of us. So I think we'll be okay.
I think Fred will tell you from the past, the staff does a lot to ensure that where needed and when you have to provide comments, that we provide that information for you. So there are staff notes and scripts and write-ups for those types of things.
That's awesome.
So we
Okay.
make sure that we support you in that capacity. And Tony, same thing for anything that you would need. So we'll take another raising of the hands or ayes for Jamie as the vice chair of the group. Oh, that's everybody. So you came back just in time for us. We appreciate it. I'm glad that computer came back on.
I don't mean to get too formal, but we do need a motion in a second.
Oh, yes, you can see. So
Well, the motion was
have the
mine.
motion
Second.
from Tony, and just need a second from Annie. We'll take Emily. Was that a second?
Yes.
And then the vote had taken place and we'll record it as such. All right. Next thing on the agenda is actually housekeeping. This is something we haven't done before in our first meetings. But the city clerk had asked us to. I believe Janice sent out the minutes from the last CBAC meeting last year. Those of you who are new could have read them, but obviously wouldn't have been here for that. But the city clerk has asked that we actually have CBAC approve the minutes from its prior meeting. If there are edits to those, we're happy to take those edits and approve them with edits. So if anybody has any edits, let me know anything that seemed off.
No, though I forgot to check for spelling of Fred's name. Do we get it right in that one?
I hope so. Microsoft Word loves to put that
I
I in
know.
Fred's name that does not exist.
I think I checked it, but let me double check it.
We will triple check it for you on the back end, Fred, and make sure that we've updated the Microsoft Dictionary to stop doing that.
It's good.
All right, there we
Yeah,
go.
otherwise I had no issues.
Okay. Same thing there, Tony, as chair, you can call for a vote on approving the minutes.
Yeah, can we have a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting?
Second.
Motion.
Second.
Hey, a little bit of everything. All in favor? Hands up.
Unanimous approval of the minutes. We love it.
All right.
Last thing on the agenda there, setting of dates and times for future meetings. So for the last year or two, we have been doing these Wednesday kind of 9 o'clock-ish meetings. I think we did 9:30 this time. If typically Wednesday at 9:30 works, this is a time that appears to work for most people. These meetings generally last somewhere between 45 minutes and 2 hours, usually. So that's the time commitment in terms of those. Does this time frame generally work for everyone? Seeing a lot of head shaking. So we will continue these kind of Wednesday, middle-ish of the month meetings. Usually, as Janice says, the third Wednesday that what we were shooting for, I think previously. But the third Wednesday of the month at kind of 9:30 is what we'll shoot for going forward. We'll adjust for holidays or anything like that over the course of the tenure as needed and send those adjustments out. But I think generally Wednesdays at 9:30 seem like they're going to work for people. That's all that's on the agenda for today, kind of the organizational meeting. So one, happy to have several new members. And again, we've got, I believe, at least 2 other folks who will hopefully join us in future meetings. I'm excited about this as budget director. I'm actually really excited to have a group looking at kind of base budget requirements. And we get to nerd out on the expenditure and revenue forecasts and show you some of that. We will attempt to do that in some way that is not boring and puts you to sleep, as 90 minutes worth of straight tables and budget figures might do to some people. But I'm really excited about this work plan, both from that perspective, the use of our debt. These are really things that you're going to see are going to drive policy initiatives for council in terms of what that tax rate is going to actually look like for 26 and for future years. And then all of that as part of, again, kind of that revaluation picture. So you'll hear us talk about the tax rate and then effective tax rates, and we'll explain all of that. But I do think this is going to be a very interesting year for CBAC. I love doing the benchmarking and the service delivery things as well, but I think getting into the nuts and bolts of budget and getting back to the basics is going to be a very, very interesting year for you. So unless anyone has anything else, Tony, the last thing on the agenda is for you to call for adjournment. Any other questions, comments, concerns, issues? All righty. Well, I will say thank you for everyone's time this morning. Really appreciate it. We will get the notice and Zoom link out for next month's meeting in the coming weeks here, and look forward to seeing you and really start talking about expenditure and revenue forecasting in January.
All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Any seconds?
Second.
All right.
Oh,
Are ready to adjourn the first CBAC meeting of the season? Hands up, raise your hands, or say aye. Looks like we're good.
It's unanimous.
All righty.
Appreciate everyone's time this morning.
Welcome, new folks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.